When I look back now, I often wonder how many women like me have carried the same weight in silence. Tonight, I want to share my story with you. It is not easy to tell, but I believe that maybe, somewhere out there, someone will listen and understand. Before I begin, let me ask you one small favor. If you enjoy stories like this, please consider subscribing. It means a lot more than you think. And please, as you listen, tell me in the comments where you are watching from. I love knowing that these memories travel far beyond the four walls where they were lived. But let me give you a warning before we begin. This is not a light story. This is the kind of memory that still makes my chest heavy, even after all these years. One single sentence, just a few words, turned me from a mother into something else entirely. He said, "You can stay, but not as family." And in that moment, I felt my heart split into pieces. I will take you back to the days before those words, to the days when I believed I still had a home. My husband had been gone for almost 2 years. 50 years of marriage had left me with habits that were hard to break. I still reached across the bed some mornings, expecting to find his hand. I still set 2 cups of coffee out by mistake. When you lose someone who has been part of your everyday for so long, you don't just lose them, you lose yourself. My son, bless him, came to me one evening after the funeral and said, "Mom, you shouldn't be alone in that house. Come stay with us. The children will love having you around." At that moment, those words felt like a lifeline. I didn't want to sit in silence, listening to the creaks of empty rooms. I wanted laughter, even if it wasn't mine. I wanted voices in the hallway and footsteps on the stairs. I wanted to feel needed. So I packed my things carefully, folding the shirts my husband had left behind as if folding him into memory. I kept his old photograph in my purse, the one of him smiling with his fishing rod, so that a piece of him would follow me wherever I went. And then I moved into my son's home, a house filled with toys, drawings on the fridge, and the sweet noise of children that made me forget, for a little while, how hollow my own house had become. The first weeks were kind. My grandchildren rushed to me each morning with sticky hands and bright eyes. "Grandma, read to us. Grandma, make pancakes." I tied on my apron and felt like I had a role again. My daughter-in-law, Anna, would smile politely as I set the table or folded laundry, and my son seemed relieved that I was there to help. I told myself I was lucky. Many widows my age were left entirely on their own, while I was surrounded by family. But even in those early days, I sometimes felt a shadow pass through the house. I caught Anna watching me from the doorway when I swept the kitchen floor, her lips pressed tight, as if she wanted to say something, but swallowed it instead. At night, when the children were asleep, I could hear her voice low and sharp in the living room, speaking to my son. I didn't listen closely. I never wanted to intrude, but I knew the tone. I had used it myself once when I was younger, when I felt a burden on my shoulders. Still, I tried to be invisible. I woke early to prepare breakfast before anyone stirred. I washed my clothes separately. I took only a corner of the pantry for my things. I reminded myself again and again, be grateful, you are not alone. And for a time, it worked. I remember one Sunday afternoon especially well. The children had been playing outside in the yard, and I brought them lemonade in tall glasses, just like I used to for my own boy when he was small. My son laughed and said, "See, Mom, the kids love you. We're lucky to have you here." My heart swelled so big it almost hurt. In that moment, I believed I belonged, but belonging is fragile. Sometimes it cracks without warning, like a plate you've trusted to hold your dinner, slipping from your hands to the floor. And once it breaks, no matter how carefully you glue it back, the cracks are always there. The first crack came on a quiet evening. I had just folded a basket of clean laundry, my son's shirts, the children's tiny socks, Anna's blouses, and placed them neatly on the sofa. When Anna walked in, she looked at the clothes, then at me, and her smile was sharp enough to cut. "You don't have to do that," she said flatly. "I can handle my own house." Her words stung, though she spoke them lightly. I nodded, apologizing, but inside I felt a tremor. I had only wanted to help. I had only wanted to give. But sometimes giving is mistaken for taking, and sometimes presence feels like intrusion. I thought my son would notice the tension, would say something to ease it. Instead, he placed a hand on her shoulder and said, "She's just trying to help, Anna." But the way he said it, calm, tired, told me it was not the first time they had spoken of me. That night, as I lay in bed, I whispered to the photograph of my husband, "Am I a guest now, even in my own child's home?" The photograph, of course, did not answer. Only silence filled the room, and though I tried to bury the thought, though I told myself it was only a passing moment, I could not shake the fear. It was the first step toward the words that would one day cut me so deeply I would never forget them. The days blurred into each other, filled with the ordinary rhythms of family life. Morning sunlight streaming through the kitchen curtains, the sound of cereal being poured into bowls, the thud of small feet on the stairs. For a while, I convinced myself that I had found a new purpose. Every task, no matter how small, gave me a reason to rise from bed and keep moving forward. I baked bread the way my husband had always loved it, filling the house with the smell of yeast and warmth. My grandson would sit at the counter, swinging his legs and say, "Grandma, no one bakes like you." His smile was wide and real, the kind of smile that reminded me of my own boy when he was that age. In those moments, I felt my heart soften. Maybe this was where I was meant to be after all. My granddaughter would curl up beside me with picture books, pressing her head against my arm. "Read it again," she would beg, her little fingers tracing the illustrations. I would read until my voice turned hoarse, but I never complained. Each page turned felt like turning back time, as if I had been given another chance to relive motherhood, to pour love into small souls that still needed it. But while the children clung to me, Anna kept her distance. She was polite, never openly unkind, but there was a stiffness about her that grew more obvious with each week. She thanked me for meals in a tone that carried no gratitude. She complimented my baking, then added quickly, "But we're trying to cut back on carbs." She watched me when I folded towels, when I rearranged the pantry, as if every gesture of mine unsettled her order. I tried to imagine myself in her place. A house is a kingdom to a young mother. Maybe I was an intruder, shifting the balance she had built. I reminded myself to step lightly, to keep my presence quiet, like a breeze that passes through without disturbing anything. One evening, after dinner, I stayed late in the kitchen, wiping counters, stacking dishes, humming an old tune my husband had once loved. My son walked in and said, "Mom, you don't have to do all that. Sit down, rest." His words were kind, but behind him, I caught the flicker of Anna's eyes. She didn't want me to rest. She wanted me gone. I smiled and said, "I don't mind, dear. Keeping busy helps me." And yet, when I carried the dish towel back to my room, my hands trembled. At night, when the house grew still, I lay awake listening to muffled voices from the living room. I couldn't always catch the words, but I knew the subject. The cadence of Anna's voice, sharp and insistent, the long silences of my son's replies. It was the kind of conversation that ends with compromise, with someone giving in. I prayed it would not be me. One Saturday, we all sat down for dinner together. I had made stew, rich and hearty, the kind my husband used to request on cold nights. The children devoured it eagerly, their spoons clattering against bowls. My son praised it with a grin, just like when I was a kid. My heart swelled again, but the glow lasted only a moment. Anna set her spoon down and said, almost casually, "Mom, I appreciate you cooking, but maybe next time let me handle the menu. The kids need variety, and we're trying to keep things lighter." Her words were not cruel, but they landed heavy, like stones dropped into water, rippling through my chest. I nodded, forcing a smile. "Of course, dear. I'll step back." The children looked confused, glancing between us, sensing something they couldn't name. That night, As I folded laundry in the quiet of my room, I found myself whispering again to the photograph on my dresser. She doesn't want me here, does she? The picture stared back silently, my husband's eyes frozen in a smile that no longer reached me. I told myself not to be foolish. My son had invited me, hadn't he? He wanted me here, didn't he? And yet, in the small cracks of daily life, I could feel something shifting beneath the surface. The warmth I had once felt was thinning, like a fire burning down to its embers. There was one moment that I cannot forget. I was ironing shirts, lining them neatly on hangers, when Anna walked past the open door. She stopped, watched me for a heartbeat, and then said softly, "You don't need to do that. This isn't your job." Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried a weight that silenced me. I lowered the iron slowly, my hands shaking. I wanted to ask, "Then what is my place here?" But the words never left my lips. Instead, I finished folding the shirts in silence, pressing the fabric smooth, as if smoothing out the unease in my chest. For the first time, the house felt less like a refuge and more like borrowed space. I held on to the laughter of the children, onto the moments when my son's eyes softened with gratitude. But beneath it all, I felt the ground shifting. I just didn't know then how deep the cracks would run, or how painful the fall would be when the floor gave way beneath me. The weeks kept passing, and I learned to live in the quiet spaces, to move softly through the house as if I were a guest instead of a mother. I told myself that I was helping, that I was easing their burdens, but in truth, I was trying not to be noticed. Anna's voice carried sharp edges more often now. "Please don't rearrange the pantry. I like it my way." Or, "I already folded those towels. No need to redo them." She smiled when she said it, but it was the kind of smile that hides irritation. My son rarely corrected her. He would murmur, "She's just trying to help," but his eyes would not meet mine. I began to eat alone more often. If the family gathered for dinner and there wasn't enough space at the table, I would carry my plate to the kitchen without being asked. I told myself it was easier that way, that they deserved their family moments. But the truth was, I felt myself being slowly pushed to the margins, piece by piece, until I was more shadow than person. The children still clung to me, innocent of the undercurrents in the house. They crawled into my lap with books. They begged me to tuck them in at night. They ran to me when they were hurt. Their affection was the thread that kept me tied to that house. Without them, I might have already left. One evening, after putting the children to bed, I returned to the living room, where Anna and my son sat talking in low voices. As I stepped in, the conversation died. Anna's expression was tight, her lips pressed into a thin line. My son cleared his throat and said, "Mum, can we talk?" I nodded and sat down slowly, bracing myself. He didn't look angry, but he didn't look at ease either. "Mom," he began, "I need you to understand. This is our house. You've been helping a lot, and we appreciate it, but sometimes Anna feels—" He paused, searching for the words. "She feels like it's too much, like things aren't the way she likes them anymore." I wanted to speak, to defend myself, but my throat tightened. All I managed was a whisper. "I only meant to help." He nodded quickly, almost impatiently. "I know, but you have to remember, this isn't your house anymore. You live here, yes, but it's not the same. Do you understand?" Those words cut deeper than he knew. This isn't your house anymore. I felt the air leave my chest. Once, I had rocked him to sleep in my arms, wiped his tears, cheered at his soccer games, cooked his favorite meals. Now he was reminding me that I no longer belonged, even under his roof. I excused myself as calmly as I could, retreating to my room where I closed the door softly behind me. Only then did I let my tears fall, quiet and unbroken. I pressed the photograph of my husband to my chest and whispered, "Do you hear him? Our son, our own boy, telling me I don't belong." The next morning, I tried to carry on as if nothing had happened. I made pancakes for the children, poured coffee for my son, and smiled through the ache. But Anna's eyes followed me, cold and distant, and my son's voice had a new hesitation when he spoke to me, as though something had shifted permanently. Later that week, I overheard Anna speaking sharply on the phone. She's always here, folding things, cooking, cleaning. It feels like she's running the house instead of me. She didn't lower her voice. She didn't care if I heard. My chest burned with humiliation, but I stayed in my room, folding clothes that weren't even mine, because keeping my hands busy was the only way to quiet the storm inside me. At night, I began to dream of my old home, the creaking floors, the smell of my garden, the soft hum of the refrigerator in the quiet kitchen. I woke longing for those walls, even empty ones, because at least they had been mine. The final blow came one evening when Anna left the laundry basket by the sofa. I began folding, as I always did, smoothing the fabric with careful hands. My son walked in, paused, and sighed. "Mom, please, don't. Anna doesn't like it when you do that. You have to respect her space." I looked up at him, my hand still resting on his shirt. "I only wanted to help," I whispered again. He ran a hand through his hair, looking weary. "I know, but this isn't your responsibility anymore. You need to understand your place here." Your place. The words echoed long after he left the room. They clung to me like shadows, heavy and unshakable. That night, as I lay in bed, I realized something had changed forever. I was no longer mother, no longer the heart of the home. I was something else now, something smaller, less important. And though I didn't yet know the worst words that would come, I could already feel the ground shifting beneath me. The house no longer felt like safety. It felt like exile under the same roof as the people I loved most. I began to count the ways silence filled the house. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that presses against your skin, telling you that every movement, every word is too much. I stopped humming while I cooked. I stopped reading aloud to myself at night. Even my footsteps grew softer, as if the very floor resented me. The children noticed before anyone else. "Grandma, why don't you eat with us anymore?" my granddaughter asked one evening, her big eyes blinking up at me. I smiled and told her, "I just want you to have more room at the table." But inside, my heart clenched. I wanted nothing more than to sit with them, to laugh at their stories, to feel part of the family I had given everything for. Anna's disapproval was no longer hidden. She would sigh audibly when I set a plate on the table. She would move things I had arranged, refold laundry I had touched, and remind me pointedly, "I've got this, you don't need to." But the truth was clear. She didn't want me to do anything. She didn't want me there at all. My son tried to balance between us, but his balance leaned her way. One night, after another strained dinner, he followed me into the kitchen and said, almost apologetically, "Mum, I need you to remember, you're here to live with us, not to run things. This is Anna's home too." I nodded, keeping my face calm, but inside I was breaking. His words were gentler this time, but they carried the same message. You don't belong here the way you once did. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, staring at the street lamps outside, their light trembling on the pavement. My husband's photograph sat on the table beside me, and I whispered to it like I always did. "They don't want me here, love. Our boy, he doesn't see me as his mother anymore. I'm just an extra shadow in his house." Tears slid down my face silently. I had lived through loss, through poverty, through raising a family with little more than determination. But this rejection from the very child I had given life to, was a different kind of pain. It was the kind that hollowed me from the inside, leaving nothing but echoes. The next morning, I tried once more to reclaim some sense of normalcy. I prepared breakfast, set out plates, poured coffee. The children giggled as they climbed into their chairs. For a brief moment the sound warmed me. Then Anna entered, her eyes falling on the table. She looked at the plates I had set and said sharply, "You don't have to do this every day, you know. We can manage on our own." I froze. My hands trembled as I wiped them on my apron. My son stepped in behind her, his expression heavy. "Mom," he said quietly, maybe just let Anna take care of meals from now on. You should rest." The room blurred around me. I forced a smile for the children's sake, but inside, a cold certainty settled in. No matter what I did, no matter how gently I moved, I was no longer welcome as a mother in this house. That evening, after the children were asleep, my son came into my room. He hesitated in the doorway, his shoulders slumped. "Mum," he said softly, "Anna and I talked. We want you to stay, but things have to change." I held my breath. His next words came like a blade, even though he hadn't spoken them yet. "You can stay," he said, "but not as family." I didn't cry in front of him. I only nodded, pressing my lips together to keep them from trembling. But when he left, I sank onto the bed, clutching the photograph of my husband to my chest. My tears fell silently, soaking the fabric of the pillow. I whispered to the empty room, "What am I now, if not their family?" I didn't know then that this was only the beginning, that worse words, colder silences, and deeper wounds were still ahead. And as I folded their clothes the next morning, smoothing each shirt, each pair of socks, as if they were my own, I felt something inside me shatter. Because when your own child tells you that you are no longer family, what is left of you?